Hello everybody, it's me again, Menopause Barbie, your Menopause Tailor, and welcome back to Menopause University. You know, most people hesitate to even utter the word menopause. They think of it as something taboo, as a taboo topic, and they hate the very thought of it. Most women abhor it so much that they try to ignore it even when it consumes every aspect of their lives. I'm odd. I love menopause. Not only do I love being menopausal, I also love teaching you all the things you need to know so that you can love it too. My goal is to give you the most complete, comprehensible, and unbiased education on menopause that I possibly can. That's why I present these tutorials in such a specific order. So here's where we are. This is video number 216. You can always tell the order of the videos by that number that follows the title. And if you watch them all in order, you'll be pleasantly shocked at how much everything makes so much sense. This entire education started with video 1, but I covered the material in units, and we are smack dab in the middle of a unit on osteoporosis. And this is the 21st tutorial in the osteoporosis unit. Did you think there could be so many? And we're not even near the end. Videos 211 to 215 were all on lifestyle options for preventing osteoporosis and fractures from osteoporosis. This video is on the dietary options for preventing osteoporosis. In my book, whether you have the first edition or the second edition, all of chapter 29 is on osteoporosis, and this material is in chapter 29 under the section entitled Diet. In the unit on heart attack, I gave you 3 separate videos on the dietary options for preventing a heart attack. For osteoporosis, there will just be this one. You see, I have no agenda. I have no particular management style to push on you. And frankly, I don't care how you manage your menopause. What I care about is that you know what you're doing. And what you will find is that the management options for preventing each disease are different. So I'm very specific. I give you the specific options that will reduce your risk for that particular disease. In other words, the dietary options that are best for preventing a heart attack may or may not be the same dietary options that are best for preventing osteoporosis. Most of what you hear from other sources is very general. In fact, it's usually so general that it can set you up for failure. I won't do that. I'll make sure you know your best options for preventing each disease individually, and then you can do whatever you want. So if you're wondering why you should watch this video, it's because you'll build on any knowledge you already have and learn which foods are specific for preventing osteoporosis. So if you had to list the best foods for preventing osteoporosis, what would you include? Want a quiz question? Oh, why not? Here it is. Which of the following statements is true with regard to the effect of foods on your risk of osteoporosis? A, magnesium-rich foods decrease your risk. Phosphorus-rich foods increase your risk. B, soy decreases your risk. Protein increases your risk. C, caffeine decreases your risk. Alcohol increases your risk. D, calcium-rich foods decrease your risk. High sodium foods increase your risk. E, unsaturated fat decreases your risk. Saturated fat increases your risk. F, carbohydrates decrease your risk. Protein increases your risk. G, red wine decreases your risk. Saltwater fish increases your risk. H, a 100% plant-based diet decreases your risk. An animal-based diet increases your risk. I, A, B, and C above. J, E, F, and G above. K, none of the above. Do you see how confusing this can be? Did you struggle with which foods increase your risk versus those that decrease your risk? You see, that's fine in trying to answer this quiz question, but I don't want that to happen when you're actually trying to prevent osteoporosis. The big key to using diet to reduce your risk for any disease is to know the foods that increase your risk for that disease and the foods that decrease your risk for that disease. So here's the quiz question again with the answer in bold. Well, how did you fare? Let's use this as a launching pad for our discussion. Since the quiz question addressed both foods that decrease your risk for osteoporosis and foods that increase your risk for osteoporosis, let's continue with that theme. I'll present a food or a type of food, and we'll designate whether it decreases or increases your risk of osteoporosis. And as we go along, we'll fill in this chart. Here you see 4 columns. The first one in yellow designates the category of food item. There are 5 categories: phytoestrogens, protein, vitamin D-rich foods, calcium-rich foods, and beverages. The second column is in light blue, and it designates the specific food items we'll address. The third column is in green for go. In other words, this is where we'll indicate the items that decrease your risk for osteoporosis. And the fourth column is in red for stop. This is where we'll indicate the items that increase your risk for osteoporosis. You see, I can always find a way to make a game out of just about anything. Okay, so let's start with the phytoestrogen category. Now, before you impulsively guess whether phytoestrogens decrease or increase your risk of osteoporosis, think about what I've taught you in previous videos. In videos 25 through 30, you learned that phytoestrogens are very weak sources of estrogen. In fact, phytoestrogens are only 1/100th to 1/1000th as strong as the estrogen you had in your body. And in many of my videos on herbal options for managing your menopause, like video 123, you learned that generally speaking, herbal products are not strong enough to prevent the diseases associated with menopause. And then, in the very first osteoporosis video, which was video 196, you discovered that bone loss is directly due to estrogen loss at postmenopause. So here we are assessing whether or not phytoestrogens can help prevent osteoporosis. What's your guess? Do you think they're just too weak? Or do you think that they can actually decrease your risk? You see, I always like to point out things that seem contradictory. I don't want you to be confused. And some things are not black or white. Some things are shades of gray. And this is one of those things. Because when it comes to phytoestrogens, it's a little of both. It's all about frequency and duration. While phytoestrogens are very weak forms of estrogen, if you ingest them regularly over a long period of time, they can actually decrease your risk of osteoporosis. So in the phytoestrogen category, you see 2 different items. You see soy-based foods and flax seeds. Let's address them separately. We'll discuss soy first. Do you remember when I taught you about the 2 different types of bone in video 199? You learned that the type of bone that is susceptible to osteoporosis is trabecular bone. That's the type of bone you have in your spine, hip, and wrist. And it just so happens that if you consume soy regularly over a long period of time, it can help prevent osteoporosis to an extent almost equal to that of estrogen. And soy prevents osteoporosis in your spine more than it does in your hip. The best way to appreciate this is to look to Asian cultures. In video 203, I presented all the risk factors for osteoporosis. And race was the very first one. You learned that Caucasian women have the highest risk of osteoporosis. But what I didn't tell you then was that there's a little wrinkle in that statement. Because Asian women actually have naturally lower bone densities than Caucasian women from a genetic standpoint. The reason they have a lower risk of osteoporosis, despite their lower bone densities, is precisely because of their lifelong regular intake of soy. They consume soy every day of their lives, and it adds up to a much lower risk of osteoporosis. So the more soy you consume, the higher your bone density will be. And studies show that postmenopausal women with the highest consumption of soy have higher bone density at both the spine and the hip. How much higher? About 8.4% higher in the spine and about 6.4% higher in the hip. Most of the studies on the effect of soy on bone have been done on animals, but one study on humans has shown that 40 grams of soy protein daily for just a 6-month period of time can increase bone density by 2.2%. But the real key is regularity and frequency of ingesting soy. If you ingest it habitually, it can make a positive difference in your bone density. So on a chart, for soy-based foods, we'll put a big plus sign in the green column to designate it as an option for decreasing your risk of osteoporosis. And I'll put this soy on our skeleton here to indicate that it's good for preventing osteoporosis. Let's see if it'll stay up there. Stay there. Next is flaxseed. Now, flaxseed is a phytoestrogen too. Do you think it's like soy and decreases your risk of osteoporosis? Or do you think there's something about flaxseed that increases your risk? And if you think there's something about it that would change the fact that phytoestrogens can help decrease your risk of osteoporosis, what would that be? I can't think of anything that would take flax seeds out of the purview of being beneficial for your bones. I really just separated soy and flaxseed because I know you hear so much hype that scares you away from soy. And I hope you've learned from my videos that it is precisely that, hype. But I respect whatever you choose to do to manage your menopause. And if you prefer to stay away from soy, I want you to know that all phytoestrogens in significant regular quantities can decrease your risk of osteoporosis. So let's give flaxseed a plus in the green column too. Where shall I put these flax seeds? Let's just set them right up there on his shoulder blades. Now we have protein. Notice that I have designated animal and plant proteins separately. So the first question is whether animal and plant proteins are both beneficial or both detrimental for preventing osteoporosis. Or could it be that one is beneficial while the other is detrimental? Do you think I'm mean? Do you wish I just stood in front of the camera and said, this is good, this is bad, and left it at that? I can assure you that I will never do that. First, that would be boring. And second, you can find dozens of people on YouTube who already do that. And all they do is scare you or confuse you. So let's first address whether protein in general is beneficial or detrimental to your bones. Well, it turns out that protein is important for building bone that is structurally sound and resistant to all the mechanical forces of life. So protein actually contributes to your bone mineral density. That's precisely what we measure when we do a bone density test. I taught you all about it in video 206. So protein decreases your risk of osteoporosis. But now we need to address whether animal and plant proteins are equally beneficial for your bones. Let's see, you learned in the unit on heart attack that plant protein was superior to animal protein in preventing a heart attack. Do you think the same is true for preventing osteoporosis? Nah, the reason plant protein is superior to animal protein for preventing a heart attack is because of the different kinds of fats in animals versus plants. So for your heart, it really wasn't about the protein per se. Here, it is. So for preventing osteoporosis, animal protein and plant protein are equally good. So you can just pick your protein. What's important is that you get enough protein. And the quantity of protein you need for preventing osteoporosis is 1 to 1.5 milligrams per kilogram of your body weight daily. What that means is that it's dependent on how much you weigh. Well, 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. So if you weigh 100 pounds, you weigh 45 kilograms. So 45 times 1 to 1.5 is 45 to 67, which means you need between 45 and 67 milligrams of protein daily. You really should figure this out mathematically and then just make sure you get the right quantity of protein for your daily needs. Here it is on our chart. And where shall I put these? Here's the animal protein. Let's just put that up there with the flax seeds. And here is the tofu, plant protein. Put that in the pelvis. Will it stay? Okay. Now we come to vitamin D rich foods. In video 211, you learned that sun exposure was important for preventing osteoporosis because the best source of vitamin D is from the sun. And here we are addressing vitamin D from foods. Do you know which foods contain vitamin D? Well, of course you do. I've already showed them to you on the chart we're filling in. Vitamin D rich foods include egg yolks, liver, saltwater fish like halibut, flounder, sea trout, tuna, cod, and cod liver oil. Notice that they are animals or animal products, all of them. Notice also that they aren't exactly popular foods, so most people don't get much vitamin D from their diets. This is one of the reasons that vitamin D deficiency is so common. So all these foods in the vitamin D category serve to decrease your risk of osteoporosis. I'll mark it on our chart. Let's see, I'll put these here. Here's an egg. And here's some meat. And here we go, some fish. Eat that. Keep it in your mouth. Don't start dropping things. It's all good for your skeleton. It's all good for you. But vitamin D is important for you to be able to absorb calcium, and calcium-rich foods is the next category on our chart. Recall that in video 196, I made the distinction between bone quantity and bone quality. Calcium contributes to bone quality. In other words, it makes your bones stronger, but does not prevent bone loss. It's still important, but I always separate bone quantity and bone quality so that you understand the necessity of targeting both. So while you can use calcium-rich foods to increase the strength of your bone, they don't increase the quantity of your bone. When it comes to foods that are high in calcium, the first thing everyone thinks about is dairy products, but I'm going to save them for last. I want to talk about the others first. The first item listed is sardines. Now you saw that the other types of fish were high in vitamin D and decreased your risk for osteoporosis. Well, sardines have the highest calcium content of any fish. So if you like sardines, you're getting a nice dosage of calcium when you eat them. Next is green leafy vegetables like kale and spinach. These are actually the very best sources of calcium. Unfortunately, most people aren't aware of the fact that they contain calcium. And worse, most people don't eat them in very large quantities. The same is true for raisins, which is the next thing on the list. But when it comes to dairy products, everyone seems to consider them first as sources of calcium. Dairy products do contain calcium. However, there are two caveats. First, they do not naturally contain much calcium. The reason they contain as much as they do is because they're fortified during processing. And there's a problem with calcium fortification of foods. Over time, the quantity of calcium that you actually ingest decreases the longer the dairy product sits in the refrigerator before it sits in your stomach. And second, because dairy products create an acidic environment in your body, they pull calcium out of your bones to neutralize the acid. So you don't end up with much of a calcium benefit when you rely on dairy for your calcium. And the really shocking thing is that the countries with the highest dairy intakes actually have the worst bone health and the most osteoporosis. So it's a bit tricky when it comes to dairy products as calcium-rich foods. And there's something else you should know about calcium-rich foods. Despite the actual quantities of calcium the food may contain, your body's ability to absorb that calcium varies. For instance, your body absorbs greater than 50% of the calcium in green leafy vegetables, but only about 30% of the calcium in fortified dairy products, and only about 20% of the calcium in nuts, seeds, and beans, and less than 5% of the calcium in Swiss chard and rhubarb. So there's more to calcium-rich foods than just the quantity of calcium they contain. Just be aware of this, especially if you rely on dairy products for your calcium. So let's put a parenthesis around the positive sign for dairy on our chart. And let's see, we can put some raisins in his eyes. And we can put these green leafy things here. And we can put the cheese. Where can we put the cheese? In your elbow. How about in your elbow? Will you hold it? Please hold the cheese. Don't drop it, okay? There you go. Okay, now it's beverage time. Oh, how we love our beverages. All right, soft drinks are first. Do you have a favorite soda pop? I've always wondered why drinks that are sweet and bubbly are called soft drinks, and I've looked it up, of course, and it's because they aren't hard drinks. Turns out that hard drinks contain alcohol while soft drinks don't. So then I wondered why they're called soda pop. And the term soda pop came up from the fact that the top makes a popping sound when you open a soda pop bottle. But there are other names for sweet carbonated drinks. In England, they're called fizzy drinks, and in Ireland, they're minerals. But no matter what you call them, they are definitely not beneficial for your bones. The big culprit in soft drinks is phosphorus, and phosphorus is just about the best thing you can ingest for pulling calcium out of your bones. The relationship between your soft drink intake and osteoporosis is very, very straightforward. The more soft drinks you consume, the lower your blood calcium levels. Likewise, the more soft drinks you consume, the higher your risk of osteoporosis. So if you want to decrease your risk of osteoporosis, definitely omit all soft drinks. It doesn't matter whether the soft drink is sugar-free or vitamin-infused or anything else. All soft drinks definitely increase your risk of osteoporosis, period. So here it is on our chart, and I'm going to use an X for that one and put it in the red column for stop. And I'm going to take this soft drink and throw it in the wastebasket. Okay, now for one that will make you want to throw tomatoes at the screen. Caffeine. Well, maybe not. That's because caffeine isn't as detrimental as soft drinks. For caffeine, it's more about how much caffeine you ingest. Caffeine affects both bone quantity and both bone quality. It increases your risk of osteoporosis by two mechanisms. It interferes with absorption of calcium, and it increases the quantity of calcium you excrete in your urine. But the good news is that you don't have to omit caffeine altogether. Just limit your intake. If you have 1 cup of coffee in the morning, that's fine. But if you drink caffeine all day long, it's increasing your risk of osteoporosis. So here it is on our chart with an X. And we'll put this cup of coffee in the trash bin. And finally, we have alcohol. Now, thus far in these videos, you've learned that craving alcohol is a common symptom of postmenopause, and you've learned that one glass of red wine daily is actually beneficial for lowering your risk of a heart attack. So now we're talking about the effect of alcohol on your risk of osteoporosis. Earlier in this video, I talked about the importance of specificity in making management decisions for your menopause. In other words, the very same option may decrease your risk for one disease and increase your risk for another disease. Well, that's precisely the case for alcohol. One glass of red wine daily does decrease your risk for a heart attack. But the same one glass of red wine daily slightly increases your risk for osteoporosis. You saw alcohol on the list of risk factors for osteoporosis in video 203. It turns out that 7 drinks per week definitely increases your risk. And in the case of osteoporosis, any kind of alcohol increases your risk, even red wine. So what's good for your heart is not good for your bones. So here's the whole chart all filled in with an X for alcohol. And we're going to put our glass of wine in the trash bin. Now, you can find the chart in the link just below the screen, or you can go to menopausetailor.me in the YouTube video tutorials tab and find all my charts. So this means that phytoestrogens, protein, vitamin D-rich foods, and calcium-rich foods decrease your risk for osteoporosis, while soft drinks, caffeine, and alcohol increase your risk for osteoporosis. And just as I did for the videos on lifestyle options for preventing osteoporosis, I'll place dietary options on the scale of T-scores for bone density to show you where they contribute in reducing your risk. Here you see that these dietary options serve to help prevent osteoporosis in the first place. They are not adequate for intervention once you have osteopenia or for fixing once you have osteoporosis. So don't assume that you can reverse your osteoporosis with diet alone. You can't. The key is to understand the limitations of each and every option and then use them accordingly. You'll see that some things are much more impactful than others when it comes to decreasing or increasing your risk for osteoporosis. That will be the case for all diseases. Thus far, we've only covered lifestyle and dietary options for preventing osteoporosis. And there is no question that of the two, the lifestyle options are more important when it comes to your bones. And of the lifestyle options, exercise that focuses on balance, flexibility, and core stability are the most important by far. That's why I gave you 4 videos on lifestyle and exercise and only this 1 video on diet. So next week we'll surge ahead with the vitamin, mineral, and supplement options for preventing osteoporosis. Be sure to schedule a consultation with me at menopausetailor.me if you're at high risk of osteoporosis. I'll make a real difference in your future, a very positive one. And also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to my channel. Bye! See you next week.